Hey, welcome to Film Recap. In the wake of having his family obliterated, a 6-year-old kid is saved by a fighter and starts his process as Russia's most youthful legend. Today we will recap the narrative of the 2019 film called Trooper Kid. We are during the 1940s amidst the Second Great War. Genuinely, Aleshkov is dangling from a tree trunk pondering nature while his mom washes some garments on the banks of a waterway. His more established sibling Petya is looking for supper when unexpectedly a plane shows up and begins taking shots at them. The lady asks the young men to stow away, yet truly courageously utilizes his strong slingshot to explode the carrier and rout the foe anyway. At the point when he pivots to address his mom and sibling, they are both gone. As of now, the kid is stirred by the sound of somebody thumping on the entryway. He hurries to take care of her, trusting the individual outside to be his mom anyway. He is amazed by the appearance of his auntie Anisia. The lady is frightened and inquires the kid to pack his things to leave. Anisia illuminates him that the kid's mom and sibling were killed, and assuming the troopers figured out that genuinely was his sister's child, they would kill him too. Her arrangement was to take the kid and say he's her child, yet before they can get away from German officers attack the house. The lady helps Seriosa get away from through the window, however, turns out to be shot. The kid runs into the timberland in dread and attempts to track down a spot to conceal where it counts. He actually accepted his mom would find him, yet the young fellow could scarcely envision the difficulties he would look from this point forward. A couple of hours have passed and genuinely needs to figure out how to get by all alone while drinking water on the banks of a stream. The kid is shocked by the appearance of certain troopers, damaged by what had happened. He before long searches for a spot to stow away for a couple of moments. Sirius sneaks between the foundations of an enormous tree, yet something startling happens. A snake shows up close to him. The little one is frightened to death, however, all things being equal, he compels himself to stay quiet. For him, no trepidation is more prominent than that of facing a similar outcome as his relatives. In the interim, the fighters construct a fire and make a move to rest. Subsequent to eating, they put out the fire and leave. At that point, Seriosa at last makes do to move away from that foreboding snake. Hungry, the kid gets one of the jars left by the men, wanting to find pieces of food. A couple of days have passed, and the kid is feeble to the point that he can scarcely walk. He discovers a few little organic products on the way, however soon the spot is bombarded and Sirius needs to escape. That midday it begins to rain. Anyway, the kid is depleted and without solidarity to go out looking for cover. A couple of hours after the fact, he is found by two Russian troopers who take him to the camp there. Seriosa is welcomed by Kuznetsov, the leader, who promptly demands the assistance of his men to take care of and care for the kid from that day forward. The kid is called by his new moniker Sergei. A couple of hours have passed, and the warriors attempt to occupy their brains by discussing their relatives prior to beginning another fight. Anyway, out of nowhere, they are shocked by a bomb in the hospital. Sergei has his wounds would in general by nurture Katya because of the assault. New injured show up at the scene, and the lady hurries to keep an eye on them, generally even powerless and harmed. Sergei doesn't quiet down briefly and shows energy to study being a fighter. Gradually the kid will fit in and win the hearts of everybody around him. Katya is called by one of the warriors, and at the point when she shows up external the tent, she finds a goat. Everybody considers how the creature wound up in a spot like that, yet they are cheerful in light of the fact that before very long they could drink milk and eat cheddar, something incredibly uncommon in the truth in which they were inhabiting that time. Kuznetsov and his buddies seem the man promptly goes to keep an eye on Sergei and is feeling quite a bit better to see that the kid is gradually recuperating. The kid says that he got an infusion with an immense needle which caused him a ton of torment. He concedes that at first he needed to take off, yet because of his mental fortitude he chose to remain. At last Sergei asks to see the leader's gun, and subsequent to emptying the weapon, the man hands it over to him. The young man gets some information about the mark on the weapon, and Kuznetsov uncovers that it is an extraordinary weapon which was given to him by Brod Ostershow. Hearing this, Sergei gets considerably more energized and begins recreating as though he was taking shots. Right now the man takes the gun from the kid's hands and returns it, for he is still excessively youthful to foster a preference for something like that as opposed to every one of the leader's assumptions. Sergei flaunts the fight tank he planned on his midsection. He then, at that point, asks Kuznetsov, assuming he possesses a plane. Upon finding that the man has never possessed an aircraft, Sergei chooses to draw one on the band that wraps his harmed arm. When the authority leaves the tent, Katya gathers the mental fortitude to go converse with him about the kid. The attendant requests that the man let the kid stay with them, and Kuznetsov promptly denies the solicitation. He asserts that a kid doesn't have a place there and says he will take him to a shelter later. A few troopers go to visit Sergei, and the young fellow is eager to involve optics. Interestingly, as they leave, Rizzo shows up and the kid runs into his arms. The man hands the kid a treat. Like the remainder of the camp, Rizzo is building solid bonds with him. During the night, Katya converses with her kindred medical caretaker and tells her that she can't rest any longer on the grounds that since Sergei showed up she can't quit contemplating him. The lady guarantees that the second she saw him, interestingly, something inside her changed like a maternal nature. Katya uncovers that in spite of the fact that she doesn't believe the kid should be in the conflict, however, in a protected climate, her greatest trepidation is that the commandant will send him elsewhere on the grounds that then she would at no point ever find him in the future. The following morning, Igor goes to converse with Kuznetsov. The fighter attempts to persuade him to leave the kid at the camp, as the officers have become connected to him. After all, when they took a gander at Sergei, they felt their hearts hotter, since it is for the youngster's future that these men were battling anyway. The leader by and by states that there is a bad situation for youngsters in that war camp. Kuznetsov concedes he's likewise joined to the kid, yet he expected to give a valiant effort for him at long last. The leader says that he has proactively marked the papers for the shelter, so his men ought to begin finding out about not having the young fellow around any longer. A couple of hours after the fact, during an assault, Kuznetsov orders his fighters to bomb the foes while he goes to the combat zone to help Katya, who is completing the salvage of an injured man. When the fight reaches a conclusion, they return to the camp, and the shelter's chief is there to take Sergei. The man holds up in the vehicle while they express farewell to the kid. However, Katya is incredibly miserable and chooses to leave without bidding farewell. Kuznetsov asks Sergei to sit close to him and attempts to clear up for him what will occur from that point on. Anyway, before he could say anything, the kid begins crying and embraces him. He says he was hanging tight for the leader and was apprehensive he wouldn't have the option to see him again around then. The man gives him a weapon cut in wood and inquires as to whether the kid might want to be his child. The two embracing, Kuznetsov tears up the halfway house records he had proactively marked. Now the following test is finding garments that fit Sergei. The most current individual from the military required a uniform his size, so Igor saves a few old pieces for the clothier to make new garments for the kid. Not long after, Katya shows up with the littlest boots she could get. After a couple of changes from the shoemaker, they would be ideally suited for Sergei. The following morning, Kuznetsov goes to the kid's space to awaken him. The man says that like a genuine warrior, he would need to get wearing 45 seconds. Then he gives him his new uniform. The kid is incredibly blissful and races to prepare, however first inquires as to why he has a sticker adhered to the substance of Kuznetsov, his new dad, and the man guarantees that because of an oversight he sliced himself while shaving. To count the 45 seconds, the commandant strikes a match and says that Sergei should be prepared before the wood consumes totally. A couple of matchsticks later, they leave the tent and Sergei is eager to flaunt his new uniform to his partners around. Then an unexpected assault occurs and the leader races to safeguard his child. He arranges one of his men to take the youngster to the sanctuary while everybody takes cover. Down and dirty during the besieging, a few warriors are harmed and the kid goes to the hospital to assist with dealing with them. He offers them some water and will assist with whatever else is required. One of the ones who had his eyes gauzed asked Sergei to peruse him the letters sent by his family. Anyway, the kid actually couldn't peruse and starts to concoct uplifting news to give the unfortunate trooper. Bombs continued to fall outside, so to quiet his companions, Sergei offers to sing for them. Everybody gets close to home. After all, that was a snapshot of extraordinary strain, and surprisingly, so a kid had the option to give help and even expectation in the hearts of those debilitated men. After those dull hours, Sergei sleeps on Katya's lap. His dad, the authority, shows up before long and sits close to the lady. Kuznetsov claims he wants to tell her something, yet Sergei awakens and wrecks the entire plan. As the camp is being reconstructed, two troopers spot Sergei shaving and choose to ridicule him, inquiring as to whether the kid was preparing for a date. Anyway, the kid professes to be a fighter, and as indicated by him, officers don't go on dates. He later acquaints himself with the commandant to figure out what his errand for the day will be. Kuznetsov questions why there was a swathe on the kid's face, and Sergei claims that because of an oversight he cut himself while shaving. In the wake of hearing this, he requests that his child go get the letters from the truck that was going to show up and appropriate them to the warriors. The men begin hitting the dance floor with satisfaction when they get the letters from their family members, and this makes the kid begin to like his work much more. Toward the finish of the errand, Sergei chooses to utilize his cover suit to slip around the camp. As he looks through his optics, the kid recognizes a couple of boots attempting to fit in a concealing spot. Promptly, he runs back to the camp and calls a portion of his allies to go get the gatecrasher who was concealing in the chiffondre, and his men go there to check what was happening and wind up experiencing two fighters from the foe armed force. In the wake of trading a couple of shots, they figured out how to catch those men, and Sergei gets back to camp. In the meantime, leader Kuznetsov gains from one of his men that his child helped catch two covert operatives. The man is shocked and is pleased with the kid's boldness and unobtrusiveness. Then Sergei shows up in his room, and the man gives him extraordinary news. Kuznetsov had gotten consent to embrace the kid, and from that day forward, they would formally be a family. Sergei is excited and calls his dad to go tell the news to Katya. The kid says he saw the lady crying once when Kuznetsov was injured in fight. The commandant is ruffled to hear that, yet at the same time chooses to go with Sergei. In the meantime, Katya is washing herself on the banks of the waterway when a warrior creeps up and takes Her jacket. Then the man shouts to her and gives her a bundle of roses that he picked himself. The lady is obviously awkward with the present circumstance and attempts to get her jacket back around. Then Sergei and his dad see Kuznetsov before long distinguishes what is happening and pulls the kid back. The leader attempts to camouflage while observing eagerly. Anyway, Sergei figures out how to liberate himself from his arms and runs towards Katya. Then he calls out for his dad, yet the man, humiliated, has previously left a couple of days after the fact. During one more fight, the kid strolls through the channels searching for Igor in the wake of getting the ammo. The warrior requests that the kid go to the underground sanctuary. Sergei will not leave his friends, yet Igor figures out how to persuade him that this is a request and a decent trooper should follow the sets of his bosses. Still, the young fellow chooses to help. He hears his dad and his buddies discussing a bombed association. A wire had snapped and a few men were shipped off. Fix it. Sergei chooses to pursue them and slithers on the ground to try not to get hit. When he finds a harmed fighter, he attempts to help and requests that how fix the wire. Sergei adheres to the directions for joining the two. Finishes. Thusly, the association returns and the commandant can call for fortifications. This brave demonstration of the kid potentially saved many lives. After the fight, Sergei fires, thinking of another arrangement. His next mission is to bring Katya and her dad together, as he has previously understood that they have an interest in each other. For this, the kid rushes to the medical caretaker and says that the officer is wiped out. Then he takes the lady, hurrying to his room. After showing up there, she finds Kuznetsov lying on the table and awakens him in despair. Meanwhile, Sergei was at that point concealing, watching everything from an external perspective as Katya attempts to analyze him. The administrator awakens, alarmed, and guarantees he isn't wiped out. The medical caretaker makes sense of what occurred, and right then and there Kuznetsov comprehends his child's arrangement. He attempts to accumulate the solidarity to announce himself, yet the lady is incredibly humiliated and leaves anyway. He was unable to let this opportunity pass, so he pursues her. In the interim, Sergei climbs a tree and uses his optics to notice the camp around. Then he spots some salvage canines showing up at the scene and runs there to get them. A couple of moments later, the kid requests that consent take a stroll with them and moves on to a wheeled cot while the creatures pull him. The issue starts when on the manner in which the canines spot a feline and begin pursuing it. Assuming they continued to run like that, they would before long hit a minefield and the kid's life would be in peril. Understanding this, Retso gets on a cruiser and competitions to stop the canines before it's past the point of no return. Seeing that Sergei was safe from that particular situation, the warrior is incredibly feeling better. In the woodland, Kuznetsov continued to attempt to converse with Katya. However, when he at last figures out how to contact her, he can't track down the right words to communicate precisely exact thing he needs to say, so he chooses to put Sergei in the story in cases that the kid adores the lady, especially he. Then, at that point, inquires as to whether Katya might want to turn into the kid's mom. Anyway, before the medical caretaker can answer, a trooper shows up and conveys a letter to the commandant. On it was a message from the central leadership. The following day, the military plans to leave. A couple of hours after the fact, they stop to rest at the place of certain laborers. Subsequent to eating, they find that a German bomb had fallen on that house and was still there. The shot went through the roof, penetrated the floor. However, fortunately, it didn't detonate. The fighters then, at that point, choose to assist them with disposing of that thing before any harm is done. They later proceed with their walk and Sergei hitches a ride with Retso and his dad. Unexpectedly, the vehicle they were in detonates and the regiment finds it has wound up in a minefield. Sergei and everybody around are puzzled by the commotion. A couple of meters ahead, the kid finds Rizzo dead. When they at long last figure out how to arrive at their objective, while his dad converses with the general, Sergei asks what his next undertaking will be. The man requests that he investigate the fighters' regalia, and the kid enrolls the assistance of an official to do this errand. In the wake of checking every one of the warriors' boots and suits, he requests that the man record the names of that multitude of whose garbs are harmed. Subsequent to agreeing with what was requested, the kid gets back to the overall's office to convey the report. During the night, Sergei and his dad stroll through the woodland while discussing the forthcoming honor service, the watchman symbol, as an identification given to the people who put their lives in danger to save the country. This means obviously that Sergei will likewise get this honor. While commending his most memorable honor, a bomb is dropped and Kuznetsov is covered. The kid attempts to get him out of there, yet he needs more solidarity to lift the rubble. Later, after the besieging with the assistance of his friends, the commandant is removed from there and given clinical consideration. Regardless of being gravely harmed, the man proceeds to recuperate and is before long prepared to walk with his buddies again. The next year, in 1943, Sergei was enhanced as the most youthful fighter of the Second Great War, at last getting a praiseworthy decoration. So what was your take of this film? Leave it in the remarks beneath, and on the off chance that you enjoyed the video, kindly like and buy in for more film recaps. See you sometime later.